Next, after learning on valuable insights on K-12, we are going to transition to higher ed with a riveting panel titled Students of the East, Driving Global Higher Education Demand. So let's join Esther Benjamin, CEO of World Education Services, as she and her panelists discuss the transformative impact of Eastern students on global education. Esther, take it away.
All right. Good morning. It's an honor to be here representing World Education Services, and I have with me here a great panel of dedicated and talented and dynamic education and ed tech leaders, many of whom I've known for a long time, so it's a pleasure to be in conversation with you. Before we dive into the conversation, I want to do a little context setting to get started. So international students over the years, if you look back to the 1970s, there were 1 million international students. Then pre-pandemic, we got to over 5 million international students. And that represented a market of $200 billion. And some of the estimates for the future, the 2030 projection that I often refer to, and I think all of you refer to, indicates that the international student market could be as large as 9 million students, representing about a 500 billion market, which is so significant. Still, international students studying outside their home countries is really under 5% of all university students. So it's still a small percent overall, leaving a lot of room for growth and expansion in the coming years. There are the big 4 destination countries, and we're going to talk about those. And those big 4 countries attract about 40% of international students, and majority of those international students come from the East. And now there are new destination markets that are trying to compete, and which has been very interesting to watch. And we operate in a very volatile sector and market. And I think it's going to get very interesting as the competition for international students also becomes competition for the world's talent as well. So with that, I'm going to dive into some questions for our great panel. And Piyush, I'm going to start with you. So what do you think is the medium to long-term horizon for global student mobility from the East? We all agree that this growth is going to continue, but for how long and by how much? What kind of growth do you think we can expect by 2030? And can you compare some of the trends you're seeing in India and China?
Thanks, Esther, for the question. And I'm actually, given that I'm part of AdmitKard, I am a firm believer that the 9 million mark is not, pure fiction. It's a very real possibility. If it happens by 2030 or not, that's the other question. But as what we are seeing, the market growing with over more than 6 million students already crossing borders. The students from the East are right now going to the West and maybe down under to Australia. But what we are seeing, like you said, the markets are growing and the reverse flows are happening for international students from various markets, including Bangladesh, Nepal, from Africa coming into India. I studied myself in China for 6 months. If you find a conflict anywhere in the world, you find Indian students and international students getting evacuated by their countries. So the student mobility is becoming not just limited to the original English-speaking core destinations. But wherever there is opportunity, the international students are seeking that, especially from the developing economies, be it Vietnam, Philippines, and India and China together would be like more than 50% of the market. So like you were saying, every 2 out of 3 students who are international are from just these 2 economies, these 2 countries. So I think as we see the growth, the 9 million number is not completely unrealistic. But yes, multiple countries need to open up their borders and create those education opportunities for international students. Absolutely, yeah, I'm gunning for that.
I think you've also said separately to me that you can see a doubling of the international student outflow from India. Do you see that
from
happening?
India alone, I mean, we have 40 million students who need higher education, and as Akshay and I were discussing just now, we need all kinds of solutions. I mean, not just opportunities abroad, but the doubling will not just come from the current economies where these students are going to for studies and work, but the larger contribution will come from newer destinations, like you were mentioning, Germany, France, Italy, the Nordic countries, be it Japan, Taiwan. There are a lot of things that need to happen. Even east to east, India to China number is growing very rapidly. So there are these trends where Indians are looking to go out to more economies where they were earlier more skeptical about the language, that their ability to integrate into that society. But I think that fear with the newer generation is lesser, and they are willing to take that step, and which earlier was missing in India. And hence, I'm bullish on that number doubling, absolutely.
And just one follow-up. India also has an ambition to attract more international students, particularly from the region, into India.
Right.
And I think the goal is to try to reach 1 million international students in India. Do you see that happening as well?
The challenge again is around employability. I think a lot of the larger countries where more international students are going, they have quite a streamlined way of integrating international students into the workforce. I think in India that is lacking. I work out of Noida, where there are over 15,000 international students studying in various universities. There is not a single university who would reach out to companies around there to try and get them recruited. So there's very limited career services support, and also the infrastructure of these universities need to be upgraded, because an international student coming from certain country would require a more amicable environment to live. So I think if those things are done, definitely India is having that opportunity to attract some of the best talent from some of the growing economies around the world.
Thank you, Piyush. I'm going to turn to Akshay from Leverage.biz. And go a little bit into a reference that Piyush made about destination markets. And the top 4 have been the US, Canada, the UK, and Australia. And we have seen increasingly that these big 4 have been implementing restrictive policies regarding international students. And at the same time, there are other markets that are becoming more desirable. How do you see this destination market landscape changing as we move towards 2030? And what can we expect these emerging destination markets to be doing to attract and compete with the historic Big 4?
Interesting question with many layers. I've had a very different view on destinations, and by the way, I think about this a lot, and everybody asks us this question. It's a question I think I get asked at least once every week, either internally in a room inside my office, or externally on a panel like this, something of that sort. But while of course alluding to what was just mentioned, you have to understand that the Big 4, of course, are under pressure to ramp up their processes, make sure things get more streamlined. And that's why you see in Ireland, you see Germany and France, you see Spain, in fact, you see Malaysia, we're talking about Japan right now. You see all of these folks trying to up their ante and become a bigger pie of the destination market. But that said, I still don't believe even in 2030, we will see a massive difference from the Big 4. And if you actually think about it, you just need to look at the past to look at the future. It moves in these cycles, Esther. And I was interviewing a vice chancellor yesterday from a UK university who happened to be at 10 Downing Street just a week before. And we were discussing the exact same thing. Unfortunately, our sector still has some political tailwinds and headwinds both at different points of time. And we see there are these 4 to 8 year cycles. So if you'll see starting 2008, you will see a 4 to 8 year period where everybody says that we need international students, we need talent, give us emerging economic talent, Chinese, Indian, blah, blah, blah. And then you'll have a few people feeling uncomfortable. Hey, you know what? There are too many of these people out here. We need to maybe take things into, and I'm sure Joshua will talk more about that in a bit. And then again, you will have that phase. So we saw the US volume going down between 2016 and 20. It went to a place where nobody would have seen that in the decade before that. At the same time now, given you know about this cliff that we speak about in 2008, when the whole economic crisis was breaking out, you had couples not having children because they were not very sure about their income in the next couple of years. So higher education cliff is going to set in the US by 2025-26. And they're all going to need one international student. So irrespective of whichever party comes to power later this year, the universities really need international students to come in, pay that big fee, make sure that they're in green. At the same time, there are of course going to be now the students coming from India, Africa, China, they're not just satisfied with, hey, I got a higher education abroad. They want outcomes. And I think that's going to be really, really interesting. The Big Four are the easiest destinations from an outcomes perspective. They have, like I think Piyush mentioned, they have a very well streamlined system around that. They have employers looking to work with universities. So just yesterday I was speaking to a university which is partnering with Netflix to ensure that every student pursuing digital communications is going to get a shot at Netflix. Or you have the Big Four accounting firms in line with multiple accounting programs. You have, in fact, in UK, we have a university partner who works with Chelsea Football Club. So every student going through their sports analytics program gets an internship at Chelsea Football Club for 8 months. So the future of education is going to look more different. The universities are adapting to it. And I somehow believe that the Big Four will be able to adapt to this change in education, which is more outcome driven, which is more outcome centric, faster than everybody else.
Thank you. Just a follow-up. Do you see an increasing trend in Indian families encouraging their children to stay in India for undergrad and go overseas for graduate school, or not so much? Is there a desire for both overseas? What are you seeing?
Esther, I mentioned this when we spoke on Zoom as well. This is a very small set of players, and even we have some of our friends in the audience as well. All of us represent a very small segment of students who use our platforms and go abroad. So maybe what you are saying is relevant for people who live in houses and rooms like ourselves, houses made of glass, but the larger majority of students who are going abroad today come from places, come from circumstances where going out is the only way out for them. They could be, rather than driving a bike in Whitefield or Noida or Navi Mumbai or somewhere else, making less than $10,000 a year, they could be sitting somewhere in Texas or Birmingham or somewhere in Perth and making 30, 40 grand a year and sending money back home. That's our largest source of FIIs as well. So the audience that is literally going out there to build a life for themselves is very different from the audience that I think you and I interact with, who are saying that, hey, 17 years old, let me try and send my kid to one of the top 50, 80, 100 US universities. That population is increasing, but the larger set of people in Andhra, in Kerala, you were in Tamil Nadu, Punjab, of course, Maharashtra, their need to go abroad is way deeper, way wider. And I think they're going to drive the trends, not our other friends in big cities.
I'm still trying to imagine huge numbers of Indian students going to France. Do you think that those kinds of markets will be able to appeal to and attract large numbers?
Well, I definitely hope so. I very honestly have doubts around how the entire ecosystem will come together. It's not just about attracting students. It's also about, are you able to give them a curriculum which is in line with they getting a job right out there? Countries like Ireland have done it well, where people study in Ireland and then they're able to get a job in the UK. People study in Canada today and they're able to get a job in the US. We have seen that in bits and pieces with Spain as well. Will that happen with Germany and France? I don't know yet. Japan tried to do that study in Japan and get a job in Singapore, get a job somewhere else. That failed. Malaysia has tried that. It's somewhere on the brink. So I think anybody's guess, but any government, and every government needs talent, every government needs international students to bolster its economy as well. But anybody saying that I'll attract international students, I think it's a half-baked effort. You really need to think about the entire ecosystem. Any student going abroad today wants to work in that destination for at least 2, 3, 5 years. International education is expensive for countries like ourselves. You want to work there for a few years and then maybe come back to this east where the sun is rising. But you need to pay off your fee, you need to pay off your financing. And for that, you need a really well-entrenched ecosystem where employers are working very, very closely with universities.
Thank you. Shifting to Joshua, who's the founder of Woolf. It's interesting. I'm going to ask the only non-Indian on the panel about retaining students in India. So Josh mainly works with working professionals who are continuing their studies. The Indian government has clearly expressed an interest in retaining top talent in India and also retaining students in India, and they're taking bold steps to expand education opportunities onshore in the country. What do you think would need to happen for India to ultimately be successful in these efforts to retain students here, to retain workers here? What are you seeing from the work of Woolf and your team?
It's a great question. I think just taking a step back, Woolf is an unusual organization. So we're the first global collegiate higher education organization that allows other education companies to sponsor the creation of member colleges. So in the same way that Delhi University has 98 colleges or Oxford has 38 colleges, we partner with organizations that create colleges at Woolf and then propose curriculum in those colleges which bear their name. And so we end up seeing some of the most innovative curriculum in the ecosystem, and I think that's really critical. So when you have a heavy regulatory system which prevents innovation in curriculum, it makes it harder for graduates to get into the workforce because there's such a big gap between graduation and employment. And so when we get these highly innovative curriculums, it helps students as they emerge from a recognized degree, which is mobile across 60 countries, to get employment. And so I think that's the first thing. If you're going to be retaining talent, you have to have the curriculum that can do it and leading to a job outcome. We're a little unusual as well because our colleges are globally distributed. So we have a lot of students who are of Indian origin studying at our colleges, but we also have PhD programs in the United States and undergraduate programs in West Africa and MBA students in the Philippines. So we see a lot of different ecosystems, but across all of them, they're members of this global collegiate university. And the mobility of their degrees is possible both during the degree, and so they can start online or start offline and then finish online abroad, or start online and finish on a campus partner abroad, as well as after the degree. So they get a job in another country, they get points on their visa. We have residency granting powers and recognition in a number of locations. So I'm a big fan of student mobility. I think getting cross-cultural exposure is really important, but it doesn't always happen at the start. So many of our students, in fact, the majority start in their home country, and many of them stay in their home country. But when they do choose to go to another country, it's really important that the degree be recognized.
Thank you. All right, shifting to Arnav, who is with Leap Scholar and Leap Finance. International education, depending on the country, can be very, very expensive, and affordability is always a major consideration for a student and their family. How has the international education financing landscape changed in recent years and maybe really over the past decade? About 10 years ago, I was leading a university in South Africa, and there were very limited options for financing one's education, particularly non-collateralized loans. That landscape has completely changed, and you all at Leap Finance and Leap Scholar have taken many steps forward in innovating in this arena. Arnav, what are you seeing? What is available to students to overcome this major barrier of affordability for higher education overseas?
No, firstly, thank you for having me here. Not just you, but the whole organizing team. Just to answer that question, one thing I want to highlight is education is expensive in India as well. Like if you look at the cost of education in India and the way it's going, it's not just sort of education abroad. I think the cost of education in India is also ramping up significantly. So when you think about it from a 10-year perspective and what has changed, I think 3 things have changed. One is India has itself gotten richer. So that's one. But aspirations have grown even faster. So the gap remains. But what's happening now is students now look at the ROI of whatever they're spending and the return that they get. I think Akshay touched upon that. The outcomes, like finally Indian students are extremely smart. And I'm saying Indian because we work today with 90% of our students are Indians, but students I feel are getting smarter and smarter and smarter, and they have a very, very sharp lens on what's the outcome that I'm getting after this investment. So I think that's one very, very big change that has happened over the last 10 years, that people are a lot more aware, and hence this whole lens say, hey, if I spend this money here and what's the outcome I get versus I spend this money here and what outcome I get is now a much more even balanced field because people are much more well researched. Having said that, quality education remains very, very expensive. And when we started LEAP, the premise was that talent and means don't go hand in hand, right? And that's the problem that we started out sort of to solve. I think what has happened is people are like over the last 10 years, we now have a lot of data about like what outcomes do these students generate. So I'll give you a data set that we are very, very proud of, right? So now, like the first cohort of students that we finance at LEAP Finance, their median family income, and this is family income because we do underwriting, we look at the data, was $7,000, right? These students have now graduated, are in full-time jobs, like there's 100% of them have graduated and in jobs. Their income now is $114,000, right? So, like, it's just, I think the whole ecosystem is now a lot more aware of what kind of outcomes you get when you are able to sort of get a student, match them with sort of their skill set to the right course and then help them sort of get to an outcome. And as a result of that, what you'll see is that the options available to students who are hungry, want to work hard, make a life on this are multifold, right? So, for example, and again, one thing we are very proud of at LEAP is all our financing is uncollateralized because we know if we start taking collateral and looking at family incomes, we will not be able to sort of support that student and sort of help finance them. So I think that has changed. I think today there are a lot more options compared to 10 years back. But the interesting thing is that the aspiration and the number of students who want to have this sort of career path and education path are so many, like that has grown so much faster that the gap still exists. And I think even today, like there's a big gap between means and talent. So that's one way of like, so that's one thing which has happened, that there are now a bunch of providers who are now looking at this segment and doing good work and providing the financing. The other interesting, ultimately it's about affordability. So the other thing that we are seeing is, hey, like pathway programs are becoming more interesting, right? Like you can do 1 semester in India or 2 semesters in India, and then you can do sort of 2 semesters in the destination sort of geography, which allows you to work while you are sort of in the first 2 semesters, you can work as well. You also save on like cost of living, the tuition is lower. So that again, so it's finally not a financing question, it's more of an affordability and the ability to underwrite the student, which comes from the confidence on the outcomes that we are seeing on the student.
Thank you for that. Wanted to ask you about options for STEM students versus others. Do you think there are more options for financing for those in STEM fields versus others? Is that a trend you're seeing?
Yeah, so financing is actually about like underwriting, and as they say, for every risk, there's a right price to lend to, right? There's no risk at which you can't lend. You just have to match the price at which you are lending to the risk you're underwriting, right? And I think it's a fact that the world is becoming more and more and more technology driven, which means like now it's clear in the data everywhere in terms of like outcomes after doing STEM courses. You look at the number of job positions open in US, Canada, etc., and like what proportion of that, and the amount of STEM vacancies these like countries have. Generally, I think it's a function of what is the overall market, if you look at the world as a one connected market, valuing. And I think now that's very clear sort of realization that STEM is where like there's a lot more demand, and that's where the fastest growing, the best outcome careers are sort of getting built. And that reflects in the options available to students studying STEM versus studying sort of other courses. But interestingly, I think like some courses that we would not have expected to be in vogue for underwriters and students have now started, like sports analytics, for example. Like 5 years, 10 years ago, sport analytics would probably not qualify as a STEM course. Today, it qualifies as a STEM course. Students are interested in it, and it's getting financed. So ultimately, it's about, hey, if you're studying, and this is like what we tell students as well, hey, if you're studying something which is in vogue and guarantees a good outcome, everything else will fall in line. And that's what our endeavor is at LEAP in general, to connect the student with that opportunity.
Thank you. Joshua, let me ask you the question about affordability. You're primarily serving working adults. What are the issues of affordability with the population that you serve?
So we're in a slightly unusual position because as a global collegiate university, we don't set any kind of pricing or tuition fees. We allow our colleges to do that. And because they're in such diverse locations with diverse student bodies, it really varies. We see degrees ranging from as little as $500 a year to $50,000. And so it's very, very broad, reflecting the broad student population. But in general, if you were to take a kind of average student who might be in a master's degree 5 to 8 years out of their undergraduate, the degree program is going to reflect the kind of earnings that they have, and it has to be market priced in order to be successful, or there needs to be some kind of government support available to the student.
Thank you. I'm going to ask this next question of all of you, and I'll start with Piyush. India is such an ed tech innovation hub, and this convening is just one of the many places where I see that showcased. So speaking for your own companies, what is your one key innovation that you offer to the market, and how do you and your team think about scaling?
So I think when we started as well, and I think there's been one thing which has been very core to us is mentorship, where our counseling to the students is driven and actively participated in with current international students. I think it's not a very innovative thought, but it's just the implementation of it, and having been able to scale it to the point that we are at, and make it very coherent with our overall processes of helping out a student. I think that is one thing which has been really great for AdmitKard, and that is one thing which has also enabled us to grow very frugally. I think that's the one innovation we take a lot of pride in. Yeah.
Joshua?
Well, Woolf is the first global collegiate university that allows other education organizations to sponsor the creation of a member college. And so we currently grow by allowing one new college to emerge every couple of weeks. And that's really founded on a lower level technical innovation, which is you must have extremely robust quality assurance strategies if you're going to allow all sorts of organizations to attempt to create colleges. So we process millions of events every month in terms of compliance and auditing in order to do that. So we've built a very unique quality assurance system which undergirds the possibility of that kind of growth.
Great. Mentorship, quality assurance systems. Akshay, what is your team's one innovation you're most focused on and proud of?
Focus on a lot of things. Of course, you keep trying to innovate across the student journey with tech, with being more missionary, all of those things. But I think one thing more objective that we have tried to scale over the last 1.5 years is, and something that all of us need in this room, we tried to launch something called Visa at Doorstep. We call it VAD. Because if you don't have the visa, guess what? None of this is happening. So we try to ensure that our turnaround time, so in our industry, in all fast industry, the study abroad piece, it's really important that the offer letter comes in within a certain stipulated time. The CAS or the I-20 comes in within a certain time as well. And the faster that processes, the more your chances of being able to delight the student.
Yeah.
It's about customer delight at the very end. So we realized that at the end of the day, and I think I've learned this from the larger industry peers who have been doing this for the last 20, 25, 30 years, so much respect to all of them. All of them really focus very strongly on visa. Did the visa come? So we said, okay, how can we really partner more aggressively with companies who understand this? How can we spend more money on this and build this as a different value prop within our own ecosystem? And that VAD is something that I've been proud of for the last year.
Thank you. Arnav?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'm proud of, and maybe it was born of necessity because we were born in the pandemic, is that we just said we'll take a very, very platform and tech first approach to this whole problem, almost to a point of being bullheaded about it, and said, hey, what we want to do is because ultimately it's a long journey, like for a student to like go from having the thought to actually going, sort of flying off and getting sort of settled and then doing well. It's a very, very long journey which entails many, many hundred interactions. And we said, hey, we want to make sure every interaction that a student has with her platform has to be logged, tracked, and monitored. So I think we just took a very, very analytics and product first approach to an industry which was probably a little more offline to start. And as I said, maybe it was necessary because we started in the pandemic, but that's one thing that we have done well, which has served us well. So we have very, very high confidence on like what's happening to which cohort and what's working, not working. So yeah.
Very good. So when we were preparing for this panel, I think it was Akshay who said, yeah, we are VC backed and, supported in ways that others who work in the international recruitment and international mobility space are not supported. So Akshay said to me, the people on this panel are doing great work and impressive. And but I'm saying they're impressive. He didn't say that. But Akshay said,
we should not take ourselves too seriously. We're a very small segment of the larger folks are all out there outside this room.
This is a group that represents 5% of the international student market. So if you think about the other 95% of people and companies that are working on international student mobility, and if they watch this panel and the conversation, what is the one thing that they would say you did not cover on this panel?
Just by the way, Piyush is here. Maybe Piyush can say something.
So my take will be, they'll say, I don't give a damn. Like, I already know this. So of course, we are trying to map our cohorts and measure every single part of the funnel and thinking about how do we do this part more innovatively. But these guys have built a massive brand heft over the last many years. They know, Piyush is here. They opened their 7th center, and I've been tracking them very, very actively. They opened their 7th center in Bombay, in Borivali. So they've been trying to fortify different places across the country. So I think they would not really be worried about this panel. They will say, okay, go have fun. But yeah, we know how to run the business. And I think rightfully so, we have a lot to learn from the folks who have been doing this for a longer while.
Okay, so one sentence, what would the other players in our space say that we didn't cover today? Piyush?
No, I think they'd be happy that we are trying to bring in certain innovation in serving the industry, which is sometimes very difficult for the more organized players to get to in tier 2, tier 3 cities, where I think we are able to create a more cohesive impact. But yes, absolutely lots to learn from all peers, be it like traditional or the new ones.
Joshua, what would they have to say about Woolf?
Well, it's a very big market, and so I think there's room for everyone in the tent.
Okay, Arnav?
Yeah, I think they would say they know everything that we have talked about, and there's not much that they would sort of like to add. Yeah, I think it's a large, very, very large growing market. I don't think the 95% players like think about us too much.
Absolutely.
All right, in closing, your teams often come together, I'm sure, And as founders and leaders of your organization working in this space, and I say this to my team too, at the end of the day, it's about access and affordability and flexibility and innovation and outcomes, right? So when you address your teams at your team gatherings, what is your sort of one sentence call to action of your team?
Oh, absolutely. I think every time it is that you have so many targets, so many deadlines and everything you are chasing. And I think the one single line is keep the student interest first. That guides every decision they have to make in the day. So
Student interest first, great. Joshua?
Well, when we face hard questions about which path to take, we often look to our mission, which is to make world-class higher education more accessible and ensure that the credits are globally transferable.
Fantastic. Akshay?
For the sake of repetition, we have student first plastered all across our offices. So we say every single decision you're taking, we actually have in a boardroom like a dummy student, like with a cowboy hat, a jacket, some sneakers, and a pair of jeans as well. It's like, hey, every time you have to think about this guy and then take a decision.
Thank you. Arnav?
Student first, stay paranoid. That's like what you say.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for an interesting conversation and for
Thanks,
your
Esther.
dynamic leadership in this space.
thanks,
Many
Esther. Thank you.
thanks. Yeah.